And welcome to Everything is Attitude. We are back, Rosemary. How are you?
I am so good. I can't begin to tell you how good I am. Although I've got the fan going on overhead and I have been sneezing. So please forgive me, everybody. If I start to sneeze, it is the fan. But it's hot in here today. And sometimes you don't just want the air on blasting full, do you? Just a nice fan is just perfect. How are you, Al? What's going on with
I'm
you?
doing well. Oddly enough, I have been sneezing the past couple of days, and I do have my fan on above me. So
Oh,
look at that.
okay.
Because
Uh,
here in Colorado, it's very cold in the morning, but then it's still getting up to around 80 during the day. So it gets pretty warm.
Well, we're supposed to have some major thunderstorms, and there's a big, heavy front coming in from somewhere or another. But this morning, when I got up, it's unusual for Florida because every morning is a blue sky, sunny day. It's gorgeous, actually. Uh, but this morning it was grey, 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 grey skies, really dark, cloudy skies. And I thought it's going to rain. I know it's going to rain. And of course, I'm supposed to be psychic, aren't I? So I know it's going to rain, right? So this is what I'm telling myself. So I went out today. I took my umbrella. I took a jacket. I put a sweater on because I thought it's bound to be cold out there. I opened the door and it's whoosh, this beautiful, warm, lovely warmth that you get in Florida. Really nice and clear, nice breezes. It's not rained all day. I think it might rain tonight, but we are supposed to be getting some storm or another. I have a feeling it's going to whiz right by us, as it often does. Uh, anyway, enough of that. Let's start the show. All right. So I thought, and it occurred to me yesterday. Uh, we were doing the Thursday morning show, YouTube show, which is
Which I miss, by the way. I miss doing that with you, but
I know, but it's changed. YouTube has changed, and we can't invite. I don't know why we can't invite people. I wish somebody could write in and tell me and let me know, or maybe just include us again. But anyway, we did the Thursday morning show, and it was a great show. We got lots of questions, and we had. Which has nothing to do with this show, but we did have one particular guy who'd lost his son, and he had some really, really fabulous questions. One of them was about karma. Are we, when something bad happens to us, are we paying for our sins? I think that's a great topic for a show, but not tonight. And he, so we did all of that, but then there was another guy who came on and he was asking, as many people do, especially having read my books, they ask me, how did I get past, move past, deal with whatever, in whatever way, the abuse as a child? And he was explaining that he was abused as a child. He didn't say whether emotionally, physically, or both, but he was abused as a child, and he felt if only he knew what to do with it or how to deal with it, because you know this thing can paralyze people. It really can, and I've spoken to so many people who sometimes actually even in the 60s and 70s, but people carry these old hurts, and especially when the old hurts are given by those people who are supposed to love you and nurture you and and care for you. It's very, very difficult for people to get over these things. So he asked me, what he could do to move beyond the hurts and the pains of his past, and specifically his childhood. Now, I know, Al, that you've had some, I think we've all had some experiences, haven't we? One way or another. I don't think any one of us escapes, uh, even if it's only mild abuse. And if we don't get it from our parents or our family, very often it comes from a teacher or, something like that, or a carer. And it's, children are generally so sensitive that it's easy to hurt a child. Even if it's not physically, it's easy to hurt a child on some level or another. And most people know my story. My mother was extremely abusive towards me. She certainly was not towards many in my family, my siblings, not all of my siblings, but she was a very mean and a very cruel person. My father was an army sergeant, so it's like, you get you're on parade every day. And every day, if you don't pay attention or if you don't do something right, or even if you do something right, it's never enough. It's never right enough. And so people do often ask me about that abuse. So up front, I would like to just say my piece about this a little bit, which is I did talk about it yesterday on the show yesterday, but I thought it would be a good topic. And then I think I'd love to know your opinion, and then of course we'd like to know if anybody's got comments, and we can talk about it. But
Yeah,
the
Rosemary,
way,
can you just, I don't know if you're going to do this or not, but can you just like sort of define what abuse, or not define, right? What abuse is, right? Like, because it could take many different forms, right? It's not just smacking somebody as a child, right? It could take many different forms, correct?
well, the obvious abuse, the obvious physical abuse is if somebody hits you or smacks you around, or and certainly I had quite a bit of that when I was a kid. You know, there were no laws against corporal punishment. If you beat your kids, you beat your kids, and that was the end of that. Nobody said a word about it. And parents were allowed to do with their children whatever they saw fit. So you did not have social workers, you did not have people paying attention to how, especially not in my neighborhood, because if you weren't, smacked around, given, as we you'd call them, good hidings, if you weren't, if that, that was the norm in our neighborhood, it was the norm. So, if you went to school with a few bruises, nobody paid any attention, because so did a lot of the other kids. So there's physical abuse, but I think the worst kind of abuse, as far as I'm concerned, because to be honest, aside from some good hidings and a couple of fairly severe beatings, um, we weren't, or I wasn't, and I can definitely say my siblings, we weren't necessarily physically abused to the point where there were no cigarette burns, for instance. There was none of that, none of the cruelty of severe physical harm. But nevertheless, it was enough to make you duck every time an adult came near, or every time your mother approached you, you'd sort of you'd duck. Or and I look at photographs of myself as a kid, and honestly, I do have this sort of like this really weird look to me, where my head is sort of skewed on my on my neck a little bit, because I think we were always in that sort of ready to protect. Not that we could protect, but ready to protect ourselves. So that's physical abuse. But I think the more insidious, and in some ways the worst kind of abuse, is when my mother, for instance, would belittle me, continually belittle me. I had three sisters, and they were all sort of, even my youngest sister, they were all well developed. They, by the time they were 12 or 13, they were wearing bras or what have you. I was 15, and my mother used to get my sisters, talk about it, and get my sisters to laugh at me, and would say that I was pigeon chested, and sort of belittling, lots of belittling stuff, and even stuff that was, people would always, when they first saw me as a child, they'd say, oh, to my mother, does that child have beautiful eyes? I know I have weird eyes. I get it. But people would sometimes say, doesn't she have beautiful eyes? And my mother would always, without fail, say, yes, but you should see my youngest. So there's that sort of, this insidious sort of putting down, of belittling, and that, went from the gamut of you should see my youngest, that was the mildest form, to calling people four eyes, or calling, saying pigeon chested, or just saying, just, or spotty or smelly, or they're the milder forms of abuse perhaps. But when you're a child, and especially if it's coming from your own family, the belittling is a form of emotional torture to a child. And it is something that erodes any self-worth that you may ever have had, or ever have had a chance to have had. It erodes your self-worth, it erodes your confidence, it erodes everything about you until you, certainly in my case, when I got my
And
first,
you become, Rosemary, you become unsure of your actions too.
everything,
Yeah.
everything. Yeah, I mean, it's not even unsure, it's worse than being unsure, because if you're unsure, at least you have perhaps have the courage to dive in anyway. But it's almost becomes you become frozen,
Right.
and you become just this thing in the corner, or this thing sitting on a chair. You become almost like a nobody. And I don't know if you've ever experienced that, Al, but you feel that you're nobody and you don't belong anywhere. And especially in my case, my sisters, my mother used to take them out shopping and come home, and there was never a question of me going out shopping with them, and there was never a question of them buying anything for me. They'd come home and they'd be looking at the new things, new shoes, new whatever, and I'd be sitting in the living room listening, but never included, never a part of. So many people in those circumstances, and let me assure you that what I put up with, what I suffered, is small compared to a lot of people. So I'm not making more of what I did, because what I went through was mild in comparison to many. But still, you become that person who's sitting to the side. You become that person who nobody's noticed you. So you become a nothing, really. You become a nothing. And then you take that feeling of nothing, that you are nothing, into school. And then you have all the other kids who have friends. But because you don't have any confidence, and because you don't have the ability to belong, you're on the sidelines. You're standing on the edge of the playground watching all the other kids playing, but not knowing what to do about it, not knowing that you can do anything about it. So anyway, and I'm sure that people listening, they have much worse stories than I can retell anyway. But the point is that so many people, even in their 30s, 40s, 50s, and even in their 60s, and perhaps older, sort of have that feeling of nothing, that feeling of being nothing, or being nobody, and they have that feeling, and they carry it with them. And so this guy yesterday on the YouTube channels said to me, what did I do to get over my stuff? And so I just want to say before we begin this, that I don't think that you ever get over abuse as a child, in whatever form it comes to you. Nor do I think, and I know that I'm unusual in this, I know that I have a different viewpoint than many other people, most other people, in that I think you should hold on in some ways to the pains and the hurts and the feelings, because when children are abused in this way, when they're abused in any way, shape or form, they're never actually, you're never going to get over it. So my feeling is, as a child, if you go through this, that you're going through a battle. It's a battle. Sometimes it's a war, depending on your siblings, depending on how you deal with your parents. But whatever it is, it's something that you're fighting and surviving, even if you're not surviving well. If you're an adult and you've been through this, then you have survived in a physical sense, and you are still a thinking and a feeling human being. So in some ways, you've survived this battle. In some ways, you've survived the war. So I feel then, why not take what you suffered in battle? And perhaps because my father was an army man all of his life, perhaps because of that, I'm able to see that it's a battle, but I'm also able to see that instead of trying to ignore or to push to one side the feelings and the hurts and the pains that I had as a child, instead of pushing them all to one side and trying to deal with them or forget them or whatever or move on, I carry mine with me. But I carry them proudly, because those hurts, those pains, they're my battle scars. And I carry them proudly because I can look at myself and say, despite everything, despite all of these scars, I'm not perfect, but yet I am still beautiful in God's eyes. So why not carry those battle scars and be proud? Be proud of yourself that you survived them. Don't blame whoever it was you were in your war with or your battle with, because, there's no point in that. Move forward, carry your battle scars with you, and just be proud that you've come through it as unscathed as you can be. But, every pain, every hurt, every feeling of being less is a great gift, I think. Because how would I possibly understand somebody else's hurts if I haven't been hurt? How could I possibly? I told the story on Wednesday of 8-year-old Mark, who was my first. He was my first child patient, and he had cancer. He was dying, and when I first saw him, I was so shocked. I wasn't expecting, first of all, that he had no hair. I was really shocked, and it's stupid to have been shocked. I'm going back many, many years, by the way, but still, it's stupid to be shocked when you know that kids are going through chemo and this is the result. But even so, when you come face to face with a little 8-year-old boy who looks to be about 5 or 6, because he's very small, and you see that this kid is bald, completely bald, I have to be honest, my mind flew right back to a time in my childhood. My sisters and we all had long hair, and I had difficulty getting the knots out of my hair. So my father, in frustration one day, got out his scissors, and he got out the clippers that you use for men's barbering. He was a soldier, you see, so he used to do all this stuff. And he got all of that out, and so he cut my hair right off, and he got the clippers, and he shaved all the way up the back of my head almost to the top. So I just had this little crown of short hair on the top of my head, and they thought that was okay. Now, I wore headscarves for weeks until my hair grew back. I was so ashamed and so hurt, so devastated by that, because it was a brutal thing, really. It doesn't sound like it's much. People have suffered much worse, but to me it was such a brutal thing. And I couldn't tell anyone, and I couldn't cry to anyone, and I had to sort of go into my bedroom and sort of cry and what have you. But I had to go to school like it. I had to go to school, and I had to go to the guides meetings, and I had to go to, I had to do all of that stuff. I was 11. I was 11 years old. But when I went into this house all these many years later and saw Mark, my patient, and he had no hair, my mind flew right back to that time, and the empathy and I don't know what it was really, the feelings, the emotions that I had for that child were so much stronger, so much clearer, because I'd experienced something similar. Not through chemo by any means, through sort of an almost brutal desire on the part of my parents to, well, for whatever reason, but it was definitely brutal. But if I hadn't had that experience, as awful as it was, I would not have had the same empathy. I would have not known. How would I have known? So, boy, that's one battle scar. And I'm so proud that I carry it with me like a banner because, as far as my little 8-year-old Mark was concerned, I wrapped my arms around this child and could really feel in some small way what he was feeling, and the embarrassment and the feeling of being odd, of being different, of and so I think you must know, Al, because nobody's devoid of child scars. None of us, I don't believe. Um, Even if you've had a great childhood and great parents, that means Samantha could tell you some stories. I'm sure she has some stories to tell. No child escapes fully, and whether it's through your parents, through your siblings, through your aunts or uncles, whether it's through your teachers or your neighbors, whatever it is, I think we all of us as children do in some way or another have these issues. But they create a better, my battle scars create a better me.
Yeah, and they could be. It could not be direct abuse to you either. It could be an experience that you have. I mean, you talked about the kids with cancer, and Christina's been on the show, my sister, and we grew up in children's hospitals for cancer, and
Yeah.
myself and my little sister,
Yeah.
we were in the waiting rooms, we were in the playroom with a lot of these really kids our age, younger, older, that were bald from chemo or didn't make it. They passed away in varying degrees of skin and bones to doing all right with chemo. And for me, and I know Jess too, my younger sister, like that affected us in a way that we would never be able to understand or empathize in the way that we can, because yes, Christina went through it and we lived through her losing her hair and being made fun of and ridiculed for that. But also us seeing other children going through these really horrific things for a child to have to go through. It impacted us, and it wasn't abusive, but it sure impacted us and
Well,
helped us empathize with other kids that are sick.
in some ways, not deliberate abuse, but still the pains and the hurts and the terror that you must have felt as children sometimes.
Yeah, it's almost like being exposed to, not that children with cancer is the same as like a horror movie, but if you're exposed to
Yeah, but
a
if you're a
horror,
child, when
right,
you're a child,
right,
it is a horror movie.
yeah, exactly. So what you're exposed to can have an abusive. If you're seeing something that your mind is just not
It's the
capable
same
of
effect.
processing it, yeah,
It is
it's
the
fair to
same effect as as I don't know if it's quite the same effect as somebody deliberately abusing you, but nevertheless, sort of. It's like kids who live in an awful neighborhood, as I did. You see beatings. You see fathers beating small children in the streets. You see awful things, and even though the abuse isn't necessarily directed at you, you are still a part of that abuse because because in some
yeah.
way
I had
it's
a
touching you.
Yeah, I have a good friend of mine from Haiti, and he had an amazing family, amazing mother, amazing family. But he, growing up in Haiti, he would tell me stories of walking down the street and walking past the dead bodies on a daily basis. And that wasn't anything, like he wasn't directly involved in that. That person getting killed, but man, did it impact him. And he's a very sensitive guy.
Yeah.
And that's something that he was exposed to at a very young age. I couldn't imagine seeing that at that young age.
So whether you personally are experiencing abuse, deliberate abuse towards you, or whether you are in an environment where you're exposed to abuse or
Things you're not ready to
horror,
see,
or
right? Yeah,
it, you literally can carry that. You carry it with you. You literally can carry that with you to the point where it can freeze you as an adult. It can literally stop you from moving forward. Now, I know that because we talked about this earlier, I know that there are some people who will use that abuse as an excuse to not move forward. But I think that there are probably more people who are genuinely sort of frozen or genuinely, let's say, retarded in their emotional, spiritual growth, because they just don't know how to move forward. They don't know what to do with it.
Yeah, and Rosemary, and not only do people make excuses for themselves at times, but I do think more often it's just a product of you do get frozen, but also others make excuses. You're in a relationship. Well, they had a really abusive dad,
Yeah.
and right. I mean, that happens as well. I mean, it's a little off on the side, but abuse can be used as an excuse in a lot of different scenarios, and we've talked about this before. That stops growth, right? Like you're done. Like if you use it as an excuse, you're not growing because you have now said, hey, that's the reason. I don't have to explore anything else. I don't have to try and get better. That's the reason. End of story, right?
And when people do harm to you, I mean, I've had harm done to me twice, actually. You think I'd learn, but anyway, by two assistants who stole from me. One particularly, we went to court, and her this was her, what is it? These were her reasons that she gave to the judge. These were her reasons for her stealing over $1 million from me. You ready for these reasons? I was abused as a child. So when it came to my turn, the judge was really lovely. I said, I also was abused as a child, but we all have choices. And at a certain age, as young as 6 or 7 years old, we have choices in how to behave. We have choices in how to treat people, and we have choices to do the right thing or the wrong thing. I looked at my parents and I'm so grateful. And I said to the judge, having explained that I was abused by, different things going on. And I said to the judge, but I'm grateful for my parents. And I remember his eyebrows raised up into his hairline and he sort of looked at me like, is she crazy? And I said, I am grateful to them because they taught me how not to be.
Right.
Genuinely taught me how not to be, and I am genuinely grateful that that I went through my childhood, because boy oh boy, I'm so grateful that I am this sensitive, caring, empathetic person. I could be better, but mostly I'm definitely empathetic towards children, particularly children in any environment, and but you've only got to look at how many people said about Clinton. I think it just blows my mind that grown-up people, adults with supposedly good minds, can say, well, all this womanizing thing, it was because he was abused as a child. I don't get it. What a brilliant excuse. Look, I was abused as a child, so I'm excused anything and everything. And no, you're not. Which
Right.
is why I say to people, yes, it's awful being a child of abuse. It's a horrible thing, but if they're battle scars. You didn't have a choice. You were forced into the battle. You didn't have a choice. No child has a choice in that way. You're forced into a battle, but look at you. You survived. You're a thinking person. You're a feeling person. You're a caring person. Carry those scars with you and let them drive you forward. Be proud. be proud that you
You,
came
yeah,
out of the battle.
Rosemary, one of the most poignant lessons you've taught me, and then more recently actually, is
Uh-oh,
is
I'm,
is,
I'm getting a bit
is
nervous
to
now.
is to when looking at this stuff, like and if we're looking at recipe too, right? Is to really look at the root of why you're acting a certain way and not dismiss it, but let it go and then turn that into something positive. Like you're
Now,
saying, listen,
give
I'm
me
glad
an
it happened, right?
example. Give us an example of what I meant
So
when I
I do,
said
I do tend to, for me, the self worth is always a big one, and I never feel like I'm good enough, right? So for me, what I've been trying to do with the self worth is, acknowledging the why. Like I get why because of judgment as a child, as belittling as a child, like blame always, all
going
that
through the abuse, going through
and
the
going
abuse.
through what I perceived as abuse or was abuse, right? But then saying to myself, all right, I know that I get like that, but I have to just stop myself from getting like that because I know it's going to be this vicious spiral. And really, for me, I just say, hey, it's the reason this is happening is because of how I was treated. It's not really who I am or what I am. I really am not worthless, right? I really am not because I contribute to X, Y, and Z in my life.
Well, you've only
So,
got to have your kids who tell you they love you all
right.
the time to know
That's
that
exactly
you,
right.
yeah, you're worth
And
something to somebody.
yeah, that's exactly right. And as long as like I can only do what I'm capable of doing, and I'm doing my best that I can too, right? So if I by changing the focus and understanding the root for me and just being positive about whatever it is or taking a positive action, like it's helped me enormously. But so I'm not dismissing or
What
ignoring what was there, right?
what is the root? Help people to understand what you're saying.
So
What is the
so
root?
so for the root from when I was a child was the abuse of, like I said, being belittled, being never always judged, never enough as a kid. So that always, as a child, made me retract and go hide and go down in the basement or whatever I did, play, in the basement
Yeah,
away from it all, right?
yeah.
So that I know is the root of why I have little to no self worth. But then by acknowledging that I also, like you say now, I embrace it because I could pick out somebody in the middle of a room who's really feeling lousy about themselves. Like I see that there's someone who's having a horrendous day and
It's
just
called
fall through
empathy.
it. Yeah,
It's
that's what I'm
called
saying. Like
empathy.
and I know I could not understand that. And with that also comes humility too. Like I consider myself somebody who's very humble, and I don't know that if I would be humble if it wasn't for that.
If you hadn't had
Right?
those experiences, and I think it's also important when you're looking at the root, which I know we had this conversation a while ago, um, to understand that whoever the abuser was shouldn't be is now because you're a grown up, and as a grown up you don't allow it. But whoever that abuser was, whoever it was who belittled you, or whoever it was who, beat you or gave you a crack across the head that sent you flying down the hallway,
Or
or
worse abuse, sexual abuse, and all
way,
way worse abuse, right? Yeah.
way worse. Yes, way worse. And that never happened to me, thank God. But whoever the abuser was, it has nothing to do with you. It
Yeah.
has nothing to do with the fact that you are less. It has nothing to do with the fact that you are somehow, um, you know, born a victim. It has nothing to do with your shortcomings. It has everything to do with the abuser. So you can hold on to this, and the resentment and the anger, or you can look at it and say, I didn't like it, but it taught me this, or it
And,
helped me to feel
right.
that.
And
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 and hold up the banner and own those battle scars and be proud of those battle scars.
And it's a challenge too, Rosemary, because as a kid, if you react to abuse, you'll often hear, "Don't be so sensitive,"
Oh,
right? Like,
oh,
why take why
the problem
the
with you
problem with you,
is,
right? So what is that to? That just expands or makes it what, like, then you don't even go there as a kid
well,
because
you know it's your fault
it's my right,
because they told you you're too
right.
sensitive.
And
They
it doesn't
told
even
you,
give, and it kills, it hurts the out that you might have, because now not only is it happening, but it's even more your fault that it's happening because you're too
yeah,
sensitive.
yeah,
So it compounds the issue, right?
right. My family, thank you, mummy dear, but my family, even my brothers who were not there mostly, and certainly never meant to be abusive, but it's sort of a habit within the family. If you've got one child or one person within a family who the others are always attacking or looking down on or belittling, uh, it's like, it's just something that everybody does, and it becomes a habit. And
And
it,
it's, Rosemary, it's generational, and it's viral in nature, in within a family too, and it's a
it
tough cycle to break.
and it's toxic, so
Yeah.
toxic. And but my mother and my father continually said I was a crybaby. I'd be sitting at the table, and everybody be eating, and somebody would say, oh, in Leicester we had a word, Mardy. The word Mardy meant that you were sulky, or that you were always crying, or what have you. And so somebody would say it, and of course instantly they start to criticize or pull you down or belittle you. The tears come, which
Right.
is what
And
they want, because then it proves that they're right.
right. Or it could,
It's a
like,
tactic.
for me, it manifests like I still have anger things that I deal with. So
Yeah,
for me, it turned into, I was repressing that,
yeah.
and I became really angry, and that's stayed with me my entire life. And again, but I have to go back to the root why I get so angry in certain situations, and it's all part of that, as that what happened to me as a child, right?
It's a horrible thing when you're a child of continual abuse, no matter whether it's a mild form or whether it's much more serious. But again, I'm going to stress, and especially for people who have had those more serious abuses, um, look to the root. It is not the child's fault. The child did not do anything. So, there are many religious beliefs that tell us, that the children are born into sin. Well, forget that, because I have seen children prior to being born, and there's nothing more beautiful than seeing uh, a soul about to enter the womb. Absolutely beautiful and perfect and brilliant, gorgeous, gorgeous. There's no sin attached, there's no negativity attached. It's us who are already here that put on, if we're going to do that, we pile on the negativity. Children are born beautiful and perfect, and so don't, if you're a person who has had abuse, and doesn't know what to do with it, please understand it is not your doing. Look to the abuser. I feel very sad for my parents. I don't feel anger towards them. Not that I didn't always feel this way, but not for many, many, many years. I don't feel anger. I don't feel frustration. Certainly understand my father don't like my mother still, because she just was just a mean person. Just because she could, she hurt. So, but still, I don't hold the resentments, because life is too short. And why would I hold on to that negativity when, look, I've won my battle, I've survived. you, the abuser, wherever you are, laid on your battlefield, the battlefield of your own creation, I'm out of your reach now. You can't
Yeah.
get me now.
Right.
I've grown up. I'm strong and I'm positive, and I'm going to wear those scars like, you know, they're my scars.
Yeah.
I'm proud of them.
Right. And Rosemary, I don't want. I think when you do talk about abuse, and we're focusing this show on it, like maybe the next show we'll focus on, the positive role models and what the positive people in life, and so the opposite of abuse and the effect that it has you in a positive way too. So just because we're focusing on this does not mean that we didn't all have, or even within somebody who was abusive, there may be some positive things that they gave to you as well, as far as on the non-abusive side, right? I think both can
I
be
can
positive.
say that my father gave me the strength that he had. He taught me to be strong. Um, it's funny you should say this, and I think we should do a program on this. So here's a little taster of what we might be talking about, is because very often when you're a child of abuse, it actually prepares you for the battle which life is. It is a
Right,
battle.
right.
This world of ours is a battlefield for each and every one of us.
It's not easy, right? There's not. It's
Not
easy when it's easy,
No, it's easy when it's easy. It's not
and
easy
life
when
is
it's
not fair. So,
but I do find that people who have had to struggle, have had to battle through, have had to go from war to battle in their lives, they're able to deal with things as adults far better very often than people who've had, have had it, had good parents, good husband, then their parents die or their husband dies, and they don't know what to do because they've never had, because now all of a sudden they're thrown onto a battlefield, but they're not prepared. I
right,
feel, if I were a soldier, let's say, I would say that every battle I fought as a child, every little bit of abuse, it was like somebody handing me a sword. You use it this way, and this is, you defend yourself like this, and you deal with it like this. You're given opportunities through life to understand what you should do or what you can do. So I feel that I was absolutely prepared. I was prepared in my job to deal with the pains and the hurts of others. I was prepared to deal with people who are going through the most immense and terrible grief. I'm not a person who shies away from it. I'm a person who understands that tears are good things. So all of these things prepared me to become a fighter, a warrior. But all of those people who haven't had that, what do? So we'll talk about that, Al, in another show.
right.
But what on earth can they do? Because now they're bereft. They do not have the tools. They do not have the weapons. They've no clue how to defend themselves and to move forward.
Yeah, I think the one of possibly the dangers when you have a subject like this, we talked about, like, those who are abused use it as an excuse, and we're not focusing on the abuse, because of the negativity of it. We're focusing on turning that into a positive, and embracing that. So I think people who are abused will sometimes focus so much on the abuse that it gets in the way of any personal growth. Right? It gets in the way of them dealing with things in a positive way, and that's why we're focusing the show on that, right, Rosemary? To make sure
Yes,
that people understand that.
absolutely. And I'm going to say something that many people may think sounds so weird. But as I said, the abuse that I suffered is nothing to the abuse of people who go through severe physical harm and severe sexual harm and so on. But I know intellectually that as a child I was abused. I know that. I'm fully aware of that. But I don't feel like an abused child because I feel that every hurt was a gift. And
Right.
so I don't see it as a negative. I mean, thank God I survived it. I came through it, and I know there are many people out there who haven't been able to come through it. But hopefully, if you know, if they
Yeah,
listen,
Rosemary, in fairness, like for myself, like I don't know, and I have the same thought processes, but I wasn't sexually abused. I wasn't like some of these worse. So I can't say that people could get through it or should get through it in that regard. So I don't want to say that people have experienced those worst things, but I hope that what we're saying resonates to help them through that, right?
well, also it might help people listening who have had some severe abuse. I have had many, many patients and clients who have gone through that physical abuse, and I've gone through it with them, and I've helped them to overcome it. So I know that. I mean, I have one patient she was given less than 5 years to live, and 30 years later she's still going strong, I have to tell you. She was physically, sexually, and physically, in every way you can imagine, abused by her father. Bones broken, wrists broken, shoulder broken, arms broken, fingers broken if she didn't do as she was told. And her mother never defended her. I think her mother knew what was going on, but this man would take her into the woods and she'd have to do what he said or otherwise. And what she had to do was horrendous. When she was 16 years old, this girl literally completely went mental and ran away from home and was eventually found and put into the psychiatric ward of a local hospital where everything came out. And in fact, her father was ended up being punished for it. And it turned out that not only was he doing all of this physical abuse, sexual and physical, he was also in the neighborhood sexually abusing the neighbors' kids as well. So
Oh, wow.
the whole thing came out. Once one person started talking about it, everybody did. But she was and is, I have to tell you, she had a disease of a lung, and she had one lung. She only had a quarter of that lung. It would fill with fluid, so it was almost like she was drowning. We'd have to expel the fluid and so on and so forth. And I'm going to say this woman suffered like you would not believe. However, I don't know if I've lost you or not there, Al, but however, she did I lose you for a second then?
Yep, I still heard you. I was
Sorry,
yeah.
sorry. But this woman laughed. This woman, she could have fun. This woman was the strongest woman I think probably I've ever known. She was tough and strong and the most wonderful mother. She had ended up with a daughter. She had a beautiful daughter who worships the ground she walks on. So, but all of the stuff that she went through, and she was my patient for a long time. So I do know that I helped her to see this as a positive and to see her strength as a positive. She was the stubbornest person I think I've ever met in my life, except for myself. And we would battle, and she would love to battle with me. She would love to fight with me, and I would say to her, "You're never going to beat me." And she'd say, "Yes, I am." I say, "No, you're never going to beat me." She'd say, "Yes, I am." But for all of that awful stuff that she went through, which was horrendous, you cannot begin to know what she went through. She came out strong, really, really strong, and she understood that, she could turn all of this negative, awful stuff into a positive.
Mary just made a comment in this regard. That is a wonderful, positive way to look at abuse. She was sexually abused, and by her surviving and doing great every day, it shows her strength, and she could be grateful.
Mary, thank you for that. That's brilliant.
Well, thank you for sharing that too. That's
Yes,
not easy to
totally.
share. Then Nettie, just a couple comments from Nettie. When abused, I'm wondering if being abused, your survival skill, so is it, I guess, a primal thing, is to freeze. And so as an adult, you do the same. And she asked, how do you then change this pattern? Which I think we spoke to after um, she asked this question
Yeah, yeah.
about the root. And,
Embracing the pains and
yeah, she
embracing
said, what
the
a wonderful way
hurts.
to perceive this, Nettie, as well. She had a couple comments. Yeah.
Right, right. It's tough to embrace the pain. It's tough to embrace what is going on with you or what has gone on with you. But it's only when you embrace it. Don't try to push it away. Don't try to hide it under the carpet, because you're never going to get rid of it that way. So embrace it and carry it as a banner. And you know, these are battle scars. Be proud of them. My father was proud of his medals. He was proud of his part that he played in the war. He was proud of being a soldier all of his life. I look at myself as a soldier. I'm proud. I'm proud that I fought these battles and come out the other end in a positive way.
I mean, I don't remember where I was, but I still remember the newness of what you said about pain is a gift. You know, you said it years ago, and you've said it a number of times since.
Yeah.
But I remember the first time you said it, I was like, "Wait, what? How could pain be a gift?" As I've gotten to know you more and talk through a lot of things with you, it's not something I have to convince myself. Whereas in the beginning, I'm like, "No, come on, that can't be right." It really, I mean, it really is. Like the pain you go through helps you and shapes who you are in a way that you could not have been shaped without that pain or without that abuse, right?
Right. And we choose. Everything is attitude,
Yeah.
right? We choose. I believe we choose whether we take the pain, embrace it, run with it, wave it like a flag and say, I'm grateful for this. I don't want it again. Don't do it to me again. Not that grateful that I want, don't keep, I'm not into flagellation or
Yeah, I get
self-flagellation.
it. I get it. Lesson
Yeah.
learned. You don't do it again.
Yeah. But, but embrace it, used as a banner, and be proud of those scars that you have. Embrace them and be proud, because all of us who have gone through this, we are truly warriors. We are true warriors of our lives, but it's a choice. How do you do it? You just decide, no more pity parties for me. Let's take a look at this pain. Didn't like it, but love what it did for me.
Right.
Right?
Right. That's the biggest piece, right?
Yeah. So, if we're putting our ingredients in a basket, gratitude would be one thing. Embracing, not hiding, embracing, owning up, even if it's only to yourself, even if you can only do it for yourself and nobody else, you don't want to share with anybody else. Standing in front of the mirror and saying, I really hated that. I don't ever want to go through it again, but I'm going to move forward with this. This is a battle scar. I've earned this,
Yeah. And
and I'm going to
and
show it
Rosemary,
proudly.
you said no pity party, but that's that martyrish piece. That woe is me. Like, why did this happen to me?
Well, it's
And
an attitude, isn't it?
that's your right, and that's that vicious spiral that we always talk about. When you start having that pity party, the martyr, so don't go there. And like you said, embrace it and say this is good, and it is a gift because this is who I am and how I could relate to others because that happened.
Another ingredient I would throw in there, like, would be a big giant mirror,
Right,
because taking a look in that mirror every day, if you look at yourself, you look in the mirror every day, you can be really honest with yourself as to whether you're being negative or positive. And if you look at yourself and you can see that you're being negative, because there's no point lying to yourself, is there?
right,
People do, but there's no point in it. So when you look in the mirror and you ask yourself honestly in the mirror, am I being positive today, or do I have an attitude of positivity or attitude of negativity? There's no point lying to yourself, because you'll know when you've lied. You'll see your eyes. You'll see when you're looking at your
Right,
eyes. You
right.
know that you're lying. So so then,
And
well,
and Rosemary too, like looking at the root, back to that main one of the main ingredients, but also like by looking at the root, disconnecting the abuse from who you are, if that makes sense. So, right,
totally.
right. So because you were abused and you felt like garbage as a child or felt worthless as a child, that doesn't mean you are self-worthless. It means that the abuse did that to you and made you feel that way, right?
Well,
So
actually,
disconnecting it.
it's the abuser who did it to you,
Right,
and if you're allowing, again, choices. If you're allowing the abuser to still influence you, to still make you feel less, that as you get older, that becomes your choice.
right.
It becomes your choice. So discarding the abuser because they can't get you anymore. They're old and miserable and unhappy somewhere or another in their own lives or whatever it is. Who cares about them? It's you that is the important thing. So rise above the abusers, but don't ever blame yourself for any abuse that you've ever suffered, because
And
no one should ever, no one ever deserves that abuse.
And by the way, if you don't change your attitude about that, it's we talked about this in the like it's generational, it's viral in
Yeah,
nature.
yeah.
You're likely doing it to your loved ones, to your kids, because you don't have that awareness and you haven't changed your attitude about it. It's going to continue that spiral in your own sphere too, right?
Yeah, we're talking about nature versus nurture as well. I think a lot of people believe that if your father, your grandfather, and your great grandfather were miserable human beings, that means that you have to be too. It's part of your makeup. I disagree completely, because we have choices. But if you choose to follow in your father's, grandfather's, great grandfather's footsteps, it's your choice.
Right.
You choose it. And likewise, people say, well, he abuses his children because he was abused. That argument I absolutely do not buy,
Yeah.
because if you personally have been abused, physically, emotionally, in whatever way, you know how much it hurts. And you make the choice to hurt someone else, or you make the choice to not hurt someone else. It's your choice. When you have been a child of abuse and you then rain abuse on others, that is despicable, because you know what it feels like and you know what you're doing, and you obviously don't care enough to change and to make the choice not to do it,
And you
which is
haven't learned anything from your experiences whatsoever.
nothing. But
Yeah.
you are also an even worse and more despicable human being, in my view, because you've had it done to you, so you know what it feels like. So to do that to another person, knowing what it feels like, is just despicable behaviour. As I've said, I made a choice. I chose to be grateful to my parents because they taught me how not to be. So I don't, I don't buy into the nature versus nurture thing. I don't buy into, because it was done to you, then obviously you're going to do it to somebody else. Because I know from personal experience that because it was done to me, there is absolutely no way on God's green earth that I would ever do the same to somebody else, ever, because I know the pain and the hurt of it. So anyway, I don't know where we're going to go with that.
So we're pretty close to time, and I'm getting FaceTime calls come in, so I'm
Well, do we
trying to decline them as
do we have any more comments, or are
now.
we
Mary just sent kisses, hugs, love,
kisses,
um,
hugs to all of you out
a
there?
number of times, and so we have a lot of reactions and likes and whatnot, but
Great,
no
great.
no more comments. But
All right. Well, then we're going to close out. Thank you very much. Wonderful co-host as usual. I know you've got to run off and start teaching right now. So we're going to be quick, but if you want to see more of this, please join us on Wednesdays. If you want to be on the email list, on my email list, you have to email me, rosemary@rosemaryantaltea.com, and you have to request that you're put on the healing list. Or not on the healing list, on any kind of list, or on my mailing list. Please request it, otherwise we won't put you on there. Wednesdays, I'm going to tell another story, another healing story. Last week we told the story of Mark. So if you want to find that, it's on Facebook and on YouTube. And I shall see you on Thursday morning. And I shall see you again next Friday. If anybody out there wants to join in with us, would like to participate in the show, Mary, how about you? Would you like to participate with us?
Yeah, she's here. She's chatting. I'd love to have her on, right?
We'd love to have you on. If you don't want to show your face, we can always just, block that out, and you can just talk to us. Anyway, so please, if you want.
And Rosemary, just a shout out to my uncle. Anyone who wants to send healing his way, he's going through a pretty severe surgery too.
What's his name, Al?
Nathaniel.
So send healing prayers to Nathaniel. We'll put him on my healing list, absolutely. So you can email me, rosemary@rosemaryantaltea.com, or you can email, if you want to be a part of the show or anything, info@everythingisattitude.com. There you are, Al's popped it up there. And if you want to know more about my darling Al Pisano, al@alpisano.com.
Yes,
it's really simple, actually, isn't it?
Yes.
That just caught me there for a minute. In the meantime, it is Friday, so we wish all of you a very, very, very blessed rest of the day, and please have a wonderful and blessed weekend, and we shall see you all again next week.